Hey everyone, welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast. My name is Dan. I'm an alcoholic and addict. And if you're from the TSSR world, I am one too. If you're just bumping into this podcast, it's primarily 12-step recovery-based podcast, but we do explore all, in any ways, people recover from whatever it is that ails them, and recovery can come in a whole lot of flavors. Generally, it gets kind of pigeonholed into the substance abuse, chemical dependency world, but you can recover from divorce, recover from childhood trauma, recover from a traumatic accident. All kinds of things can fall under the world of the word recovery. So I think it sums up best to just say getting back to the true me, recovering my true self. So that's what we explore here. DTMWW.net or DTM Woodworking Handyman. I'm a little handyman woodworking company here in the Louisville metropolitan area. If I can be of any assistance, please let me know. It's 502-292-7444 or dan@dtmww.net. 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book by James Christopher Cone. It is available on Amazon in Kindle format and a couple different hard copy formats. It is the 12 steps formatted for anyone and everyone. It doesn't focus so much on the substance abuse, chemical dependency angle, although the information is kind of comes from that direction, being that the writer come from that background. But it is a way to harness these 12 steps to help give you a little more in your life, or a little better in your life if you have any room for that. And rarely find somebody that doesn't have room for a little more or a little better. I don't know if your tank ever gets completely full. So that's 12-Step Spiritual Recovery. James Christopher Cone. And like always, if you need any help, you can hit one of them emails or telephone numbers and I'll help you find that stuff. We have meetings in the Louisville area. We have Zoom meetings and live meetings here. And we'll hook you up if you're interested in utilizing these tools or giving them a shot. Music here's before and after this podcast is by Darren Frank. Super good buddy of mine, and guys just was influential in my recovery, and I'm just glad to have his music wrapped around here. He sings recovery-based songs, and it's kind of funny. I was talking to somebody not long ago that was one of my guys is a Deadhead. He chased the Grateful Dead and did all that, and would disappear all summer long on tour, chasing here and chasing there. And then he got sober. He didn't know how he was going to do that, and that would be tricky business to some extent. But it's funny how all of a sudden the lyrics in the songs all changed for him once he started getting a recovery-based mind. He started hearing the lyrics in a different way than he was hearing them. So that's I say that to say this is that Darren's music truly is with recovery in the front end of it when it was written. But I noticed when I got sober, I started hearing recovery themed things in lots of songs and lots of shows and lots of other things that it's kind of like what you have your focus on. Lindsay's with me today. Lindsay is dang it, it's going to kick me. Cindy's sponsor. And she was here with us a couple of weeks ago when Cindy told her story, and when she sat in with for a little bit. And I rarely let somebody get. I don't think there's any accidents why people run into each other. So if I get that nudge, and I trust it, if I get that nudge to say, ask or don't ask, whichever one, I follow that nudge today, and I'm glad that you were able to come in and share your story.
Thank you.
I hear a lot of great stuff about you.
No.
I really do. No kidding. From a few different angles, people have asked me, and I never knew who Cindy's sponsor was, or I didn't. Not until until Travis's latest birthday did I finally meet you. So. Super cool to have you in here today, and I really, really appreciate you taking your time out to share your story, because that is the fundamental way we pass this thing along, is by telling our story and what we did, and as the book says, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Mm-hmm. So how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for having me here. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, so doing these podcasts is kind of fun. It's fun to me, and I see people's energy, my guests' energy, always end up leaving here a little juiced up So I know it's also. I don't think I've had a single strikeout where I had a podcast where I recorded one and walked off and felt, like it maybe was a flop or something. That something didn't go right or anything. Every one of them. There's no reason why I think it's like those higher power attaboys or God winks or God nods. You hear all kinds of little
God shots.
God shots, all the little acronyms and sayings for these things that tell me that my compass needle is pointed in my true north. When you get those little taps on the shoulder, and the podcast being supported like that, continuing to have guests come in, and then and feeling really good about episode after episode, because I know some people do some podcasts that don't make it to the air.
Yeah.
And I've questioned a couple of them on whether if I thought the content was in alignment with what I was doing here. But I just didn't. I set that to the side and went, God didn't send them here if it wasn't supposed to be.
Yep.
So I just roll with it. What is your sobriety date?
My sobriety date is June 23rd of 2009.
2009. So that... my math, that's 12.
12 years,
12
yes.
years. That's a long time.
It's a miracle.
Yeah.
That is true.
It's a funny thing, this time thing, I always do reflect on that. I love when people having their first birthdays. There's nothing funner than to be in somebody's first, they make it through that first year, especially if you were able to walk beside them the whole time, if you kind of knew them. I mean, when you can see somebody that comes in the door and then you watch their progress, that's a lot of fuel for my soul to watch that happen, and then to watch how much somebody changes. And then there's like a time warp. It was for me,
Yeah.
First off, you're really getting a lot of attention in your home group and things like that, and for a year, and then you get that token. It almost feels like people pull the rug out from underneath it, because somebody else came in and they're on their first year and everybody's paying attention to them. I always call that like a 2-year vacuum. Like in our home group, you get a token every month, and then all of a sudden, one day you're not going to get another one for a year. And you're so used to getting all this and getting everybody clapping for you, and boom. That's why I think sponsorship's so important, and I don't think there's any rule on how long you're sober. You can help somebody, and
right.
And that really, really does keep you in the ball game. But then that time warp thing happens, because I'm working on 7 years, and it's like a flash. It almost doesn't compute. It does feel like a long time since I've had a drink or a drug. It does feel like that, but it feels like just a minute ago that I went through the early part of recovery and the struggle that is, trying to utilize these steps and get some kind of design for living under my feet that could keep me, remove that obsession and move me along in a trajectory that 180 degrees out from where I used to be. Did you grow up around here?
I grew up in Madison, Indiana.
Madison.
Yes.
Nice.
Don't judge me.
Hoosier. I always like that, but I get people that grew up in Indiana.
Yeah, my parents are still living there in the same house that I grew up in. They fly north for the winter, though.
Oh, do they?
They're in Michigan. Yeah.
For the summer.
For the summer. Yeah, it is the summer.
So they kind of snowbird by staying here when it's cool and go up there when it's warm.
When it's warm, yep, that's what they do.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. The winters up there can be rather rough. Do they have some background up there, or they just go for fun?
Yeah. So my dad was born in the house on the beach on Grand Traverse Bay, where they still own that property. So it's owned by sort of the whole family. It's nice. It's now been bought up. All the other lots have been bought up by hockey players. So we still got our one little beach cottage, and then these huge.
Big, nice places. Keeps your property value up.
Yeah.
Or they're saying yours is bringing theirs down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So it sounds like one of the things is like some sticking when roots, or whatever you would say, when you hang on to that, your roots from growing up. I'm that way too. Like I live in a house I grew up in.
Yeah.
Yeah. That means something to me.
It took me a long time in recovery to get back to that, though. I did a lot of running before I came back to where my roots are.
Yeah.
So.
Do you go up there?
I go up there during the summer. We now take, we went up there when we were kids, and so I take my kids up there. But there was sort of a lot of years in active addiction there where I was, missing in action for sure. So, but yeah, it's good.
I do love the North. I have absolutely no desire to go south. Like the beach in Alabama, Gulf Shores, Florida, all that stuff has nothing for me. Now, when we've been through winter and it's like February or something, that can kind of start scratching at me.
Yeah.
When you want a
it's
little
cold,
warmth,
you're
I
in
can
the
see
middle.
that, but
Yeah.
I just can't make any sense out of going to Florida in July. I hate the sand, and but man, my family used to go vacation when I was a kid to like Wisconsin and places like that.
Up on the Great Lakes,
in the summertime, and go up there and it's a little milder. And, there's something about that North Woods too that touches me somehow. I'm not quite in connection with, but know that that does something for me. I've been up to a week-long canoeing trip up in Quetico in the Boundary Waters with my dad, my brother, and my cousin, a real close cousin, and that was a vacation I'll never forget. I'm actually anxious to go back, although I'm afraid the Colorado thing is going to
ruin that.
I need more. Yeah, it's going to nudge me to want more of that too.
Yeah,
I really like it around here. I really do.
Me too.
I got no desire to go anyplace else. I've got some property here. I've got a nice place to live. I've got this shop. I've got a lot of anchors in around here, and I just can't imagine uprooting and going anyplace else. I like it. So, your brothers, sisters? Tell me a little bit about growing up.
So, like I said, I grew up in Madison. I have one sister, and she's 6 years older than me. Her name's Chris, and my mom was a school teacher for emotionally handicapped children her whole life there in Madison, and retired. And my dad was a propane tank installer serviceman for the entire time that he, until he retired. And my sister and I, growing up, that was my first indication pretty young that I was abnormal, or at least my outlook on the world was abnormal. I couldn't put it into words back then, but I can only say that I was born into the world feeling less than, because I immediately, from my youngest memory, compared myself to her. And I always came up short there. And I remember just recently, I heard a preacher or somebody say something that really struck me, and it was like, if I'm comparing myself to somebody, it's never on a spiritual plane, because I'm either always going to be less than or I'm always going to be greater than, but I'm never just a fellow among my fellows. And it kind of talks about that in AA literature, about how we want to be on top of the heap or under the heap, but we just never want to be part of the fellowship. So that was really my whole life. She was very what every parent would want in a child. She did all the things that she was supposed to do that met their sort of standards of a child, and I felt that I was never going to be able to meet that. So I just literally took off running the other direction when I was really young, because I realized I wasn't going to get any positive attention unless I worked really hard. And so I just always went for the negative attention, because it was better than no attention at all.
And that's a pretty good spread. The 6 years is pretty wide. Because and I don't really. My dad had a brother that was like 10 years older, and I've had some cousins that had siblings that were that much older, and it was almost like they weren't really a sibling. They're so that's so many years by that. You're still a little kid, and they're driving. And
they don't want any part of that mess.
Yeah. So
I will say, as a result of these steps, as in all my relationships, that I truly incorporate these principles. That relationship has completely healed, and I learned early in recovery that if I changed my reaction to her, her reaction to me always changed. So she didn't have to change in order for that relationship to get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's, one of the many miracles that this stuff does. There's this big, and Bill says it really good in the book in a couple different places, but the pile of problems so big we can't imagine solving them all. That's definitely a paraphrase. But relationships is definitely in that pile when we get here about how we're gonna, I'll never be able to fix this one or fix that one, and I'm quick today to go, don't, let's stop that right here now. I've yet to see anything this stuff doesn't work on.
Yes.
Mostly because I'm the problem. We're going to work on you. It really ain't them.
New relationships. So the relationships that were struggling when I got sober, which were, immediate family for the most part, or any kind of romantic relationships. But those, I knew those triggers so well that when I got sober and worked these steps thoroughly, I was able to really work on my character defects and those triggers. So those relationships got better. But new relationships in recovery, I didn't catch on to the triggers quick enough to where my character defects were already all over them, and I've found that those things have been harder to catch the longer I've been sober.
That's interesting.
How that works.
Yeah, I haven't had the best relationship history since I've been sober either. Not to say that I was married for 17 years.
Yeah.
I can't say that was actually. I don't know that I did anything to be successful there. I can't take credit for anything there. But it's interesting because the divorce was a result of my addictions, my alcoholism and addiction, and we'd probably still be together if it wasn't for that. I'm throw that out there because I know that's how it ended. But yeah, relationships are no easier to
navigate.
I say. Yeah. They're easier because I'm not such a mess. But I haven't really found that magic button sweet spot yet. No. And I don't know that I want to either. That's another thing that I've leveled out and realized that I do like me. And I'm okay not having somebody. I look back now and look at to some extent, I either was in a relationship or I was stalking my next victim. I needed to be in a relationship. It's one of them problems in the beginning. If you either got a problem with your current relationship or you got a problem because you ain't in a relationship. And I need one now.
But I think I think sort of that's human condition, but some of that is that, us as alcoholics cannot go within ourselves and to God to fix that void inside of us. So we're always looking on the outside. And without alcohol and drugs, like people of the opposite sex are the next.
Yeah.
Or workaholism. I mean, those two things, I have to vacillate back and forth and try to keep my bearings. You know what I mean? Yeah,
we're in alignment on that. I said, stole this from some speaker, and he said, busyness is my drug of choice in recovery. I just stay real busy.
Yes, and that can definitely feed my other character defect, which is martyrdom.
Yeah.
I can talk about how
busy I am.
I got all this shit going on so that, I don't know, so I seem more important than I am, It's crazy.
It is. It's, the awareness of those things, though, is worth its weight in gold today. At least I know that's out there, it's the oblivious, martyrdom is another one that
that's kind of the world we live in today, though. Everybody wants to be the busiest person, you know what I mean? Because it comes with pomp and prestige. And
it's like a measure of success or something about how busy you can be and how many balls you can have in the air at the same time. And this never reminds me of another meme that really hit me hard a couple of years ago. It says, let's all stop telling each other how busy we are. and I really do think about that today, because when you ask somebody, go up, just say how you been, and 80% of the time they're going to say busy.
Busy.
That's going to be their answer, and I know we're all busy.
So it's the world we live in.
Yeah. How are you really? So back to that childhood. I suppose whatever you want to tell me about how that. Any particular things that happened, and then I also would like to get around. I'm sure you remember at some point when you first started being attracted to the chemicals for a solution.
So, I would say my life growing up early on was pretty normal. My parents, they loved me. They told me they loved me. They got me in sports. They told me they were proud of me. They were, there was nothing that I needed that I wasn't getting from them. But because I'm an alcoholic, I always want more. It was early on, it was like that. It was before I took my first drink. It was never going to be enough, whatever they were offering. And so I just remember feeling abnormal compared to the rest of my peers. And I heard it when I came into AA. Like, I felt like I had missed the day when they explained this whole, like, guidebook to life thing. Like, I missed all that shit. So what I saw other people doing with impunity seemed impossible to me. And so that's why I like the part in the 9th Step Promises where it says, you know, we're able to handle things which used to baffle us, because everything baffled me.
Yeah.
Long before I took a drink. My life was unmanageable long before I took a drink. But that first drink when I was about 12 was a solution to that unmanageability. For the first time, it all kind of aligned. Like, it wasn't that I was the funniest person in the room or the prettiest girl in the room or the smartest person in my family. It was that, like, I no longer cared, that I wasn't any of those things. And I felt like that must be what normal people feel like. And when I got sober, they told me, normal people drink to feel good and alcoholics drink to feel normal. And that was my experience, you know. And I just remember feeling, for the first time in my life, some relief from the constant state of anxiety that my abnormality in life caused. You know, and when I talk to my parents, I always say, because I can look back at pictures and I can just see that self-loathing for myself that I had in me at a very young age. And I would always tell them, like, God, I was just so weird. And they'd say, you weren't weird, you were so cute. But, like, to me, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what anybody thought of me because my perception was crooked. I mean, we have a disease of the perception. So I drank and used. I was arrested a few times in my teenage years, which was extremely embarrassing for my parents. They played bridge with, like, the local judges in Madison and would have to take me in to get put on house arrest. It was embarrassing for them. But when I, you know, was in the midst of my addiction, I did not understand fully how I was being selfish, because I wasn't necessarily, like, stealing from them, but you know what, I was stealing, like, peace of mind from them.
Yep.
You know, they were doing everything they could to give me every opportunity at life, and I was just throwing it away, and really with such disregard for how much effort they were putting in to, you know. And now that I have children, I understand that really all they ever wanted was for me to be okay. They didn't care about all the other shit. They just wanted me to be okay. So that went on, and so when I was 18, the last 2 years of high school, I dated a guy named Donnie. He went to the Navy, like, immediately as soon as we started dating, which is great because I didn't really like him that much, you know what I mean? But his dad grew his own weed and made his own dandelion wine out there in DuPont, so I would skip school every day and drive out there and play foosball with those old drunk guys and smoke some homegrown weed and, you know, drink dandelion wine, and it was, like, quite the life. Well, my dad was a merit scholar to Michigan State because of just based on his SAT scores. And my mom got her master's degree in education. She went to the University of Michigan. My sister went to IU. So, like, there was some pressure on me to pick a college at some point. But my sister had dropped out about her junior year. And I just remember thinking, like, if she can't make it, I'm not going to make it. And I knew pretty early on I couldn't handle that much freedom because I was already struggling in my current environment to stay in bounds. So, also, he had gone off to the Navy. We went and saw him graduate from boot camp. And then, like, my senior year, G.I. Jane came out, and she was such a badass, right? So, like, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be Demi Moore. Which she was in the Navy SEALs, whatever. I had, like, this diluted sense of grandeur, but I did. I joined the military, and it's funny looking back because I was trying to get away from my parents, like, you know, like, get out from under their thumb and their control. I just didn't want to spend their money on college because I knew the dictatorship would continue, and I couldn't fucking deal with it. And so I go to the military where obviously they don't have
Let's go
any control over you. You know what I mean? And
go someplace with some real rules.
But that was the first geographical cure I'd ever had, and it was the first time I realized 2 years later, as I was sitting in that court-martial getting kicked out for a dirty urine, I remember knowing that I had brought myself with me, right? Like, I thought that I could go to the military and the structure would be so, like, the integrity of the structure would be so that I would not go back to my old ways of powerlessness over drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, this will be good for me.
This will be good for me. I won't want to do drugs, and I won't want to find those people that fulfill this weird thing that I have inside of me.
This will fix me.
Yeah, and it didn't. And so I got kicked out of the Navy when I was about...
Did you have a period where it did? Like, was it successful like you were when you first showed up there and were able to, like, keep a rope around things in the beginning? Or was you off the rails as soon as you hit the door?
As soon as I got out of boot camp, I was pretty much off the rails because boot camp, you can't do anything.
You can't do anything, yeah.
Mm-mm. But by the time I got out of boot camp, I needed a solution to the way I was feeling because that was, again... we just have I'm not able to deal with life on life's terms. Like, I believe every human has a hard time dealing with change and stuff, but my ways of coping with those things are unhealthy. So what happens is I just don't really cope with them, and then they become so enormous that I have to figure out a way to feel better.
I would find that those cures or whatever, those things I was looking for to fix me would work for just a little while in my world, and whether if it was, and like, a boot camp is a little different because it definitely is. The straps are tightened down.
There's no getting out of that one.
Kind of like jail or something. I used to think there was a time I thought when people said they were in jail that the sobriety time really didn't count. Because I was like, well, you're
incarcerated.
But from what I understand, you can get whatever you want in jail now. So, like, well, not necessarily.
Maybe harder in some ways because I'm sure that the pressure to act on illegal activities in there is probably higher.
But I'd have changes in my life that I would think were going to be the thing, I could see, and I'd be like looking forward to them, thinking that when I can't wait till I get there, because when I get there, that'll straighten me up. I won't be able to, I'll get this promotion at work and I won't be able to do what I've been doing, or I get married or I have a kid. All these little things in my life that I thought would help me I truly did think they would fix me, and they would work for a little bit, but there I would come, once I got comfortable with the situation or whatever, I'd right back to my old stuff.
Destructive shit.
Happened faster and faster each time too.
And my parents were disappointed. I mean, they knew it was coming. I got the court-martial results maybe 6 months before I actually got discharged.
So about 2 years in, did you say?
I was about in 2 years when I got kicked out. And
what were you doing?
So I got pretty high test scores on my ASVAB. It was just below a nuke, so you could split off into two, which was electronic technician was an ET or a fire controlman who fire all the weapons. But that's all electronic work, really. So I was an FC, and so I was in school basically the entire time because it was it was a 6-year enlistment commitment for that because 2 of it was school. So I didn't even ever get out of the school.
And what were you doing that you failed in piss tests?
Well, I mean,
all questions are good.
All the things, but when I finally got the piss test, so what had happened was, it's just weird to think about all this because it seems like I was a totally different person back then. But I was about 19, and they would just have these hotel parties and at people's, at people's apartments that you didn't know. So me and this girl Chelsea had gone to a party, and I had met a guy that I liked there. And when I woke up in the middle of the night, he was sexually assaulting me, but I was completely wasted. I'd gotten so drunk that night I was throwing up off the balcony, and so I passed out on the floor. So that happened, and he was in my school, so I knew who he was. It was a different guy than who I thought it was because I was so wasted I couldn't even identify him at first. And then what happened was, though, I also was being extremely promiscuous during that time because, like, when I'm in my active addiction, like, there's no holds bar. So I got pregnant during that whole situation. And of course, to make my parents feel better and everything, I blamed it on that guy because that's the easier, softer way for me. Instead of admitting that I'm just a hoe bag, it's easier to say that, I'm a victim. I'm a victim in this situation, right? So in true martyrdom form, that's what I did. I carried that child and I put it up for adoption at the very end. But of course, I got all the self-pity and victim shit that I wanted, but I did drink and use. I drank for the beginning of that pregnancy, but I smoked weed that entire pregnancy, which is one of those things that I don't have a judgment call one way or the other, but as soon as I had that baby, they piss tested me. I mean, because they tried to piss test me once when I was pregnant, and I pretend that I fainted so that they couldn't, and they took me to the hospital. It was ridiculous, so ridiculous. So what I got kicked out for was just THC. So it's interesting though, because the day that I got out of the Navy, I got kicked out, and I got kicked out with about 10 people that were all on hold at the same time. We all been partying together that whole time in the barracks after muster, and we all got kicked out together. So we all moved into this 3-bedroom crappy apartment that was, I don't even know who was on the lease. We just partied the shit out. Well, anyways, that night, I did all the drugs. Passed out that night. They came waking me up the next day at 10 o'clock, out of a drug-induced coma, saying the World Trade Center has been hit. Wow. So it was the very next day. I got kicked out on September 10th of 2001, and then the next day. So the point is, my parents were so disappointed in me for getting kicked out of the military. And that day, they were so fucking grateful that I was no longer in the military. But it didn't matter because I would never forgive myself. It took me years to be able to forgive myself for that, because our alcoholism takes anything that it can to keep us down, so we feel like shit about ourselves.
Yep. So on that regard, do you mean you feel bad because you weren't able to, you failed the country, so to speak? I
just failed, I just failed myself and my family. And yourself. The more I've done step work on it, it's just like everything else. My pride and ego were damaged beyond repair. Yeah. Because I couldn't keep the lie up, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I've listened to some stories about some men. I kind of listen to a lot of military dudes, I like listening to the SEALs and the Special Forces and the Delta guys, these dudes who are certified badasses. And a lot of their stories are around the 9/11, because that changed the gears for our military. They didn't have nothing to do from Vietnam to 9/11 almost.
Yeah, besides the Gulf War.
Yeah, there's a couple little things. There's some stuff, but a guy getting hurt, right before that, and he just kicked himself up and down because he wasn't, he wanted to go fight. This is the fight. That's just the whole reason I've been in the military. I've been waiting for this day, and here I freaking get hurt on training exercise, and I can't do it.
Wow.
And so I didn't know if it was more of that flavor of feeling like you dropped the ball and wasn't able to get in to, because there are definitely some patriotic and some stuff. I love my country. And I would like to think that given the chance I would stand up for it in that way. I never did.
Yes.
But, or if it was just a personal letdown of just one more nail in the coffin kind of thing, where it just never was enough, and now here this time I've proven it.
That I'm just,
this time I've really proved it.
It's really, I am not a super, I love America. But the things I love about it maybe aren't as much the patriotism as it is the kind of melting pot thing, and that we're all sort of allowed to be here, and it's a free country. But I don't err on the side of being super patriotic, you know what I mean? But I was proud of myself for getting through what I got through there in the military, but I just couldn't stop using. I could not stop using. Pregnant, not pregnant, military, not military, rules, no rules, it didn't matter. I couldn't stop. And I wouldn't have put it this way because I hadn't been taken to any sort of 12-step program. It's weird that you get kicked out of the Navy for things like that, and at that time, that was 20 years ago now, they didn't send me to any sort of...
go to treatment.
Anything. They didn't send me to anything.
Yeah. That's definitely something else that, I don't know if they do that now. or not.
Probably. I would assume so.
You know, I got kicked off my high school basketball team for smoking dope.
Wow.
And actually something brought, so one of these guys from that time come back in my life the other day, one of the guys that got kicked off. There's 5 of us got kicked off. There's only 2 of us still alive.
Holy moly. Is he in recovery?
No.
No.
Nope.
Is he? Is he?
I have a hard time saying what he is, but I know he's because when I told him I was, I just got, because that's a big turning point in my life. Like, then the chains come off.
Yeah.
Because I had no other reason to hang on anymore. I was trying to be halfway the good guy so I could play ball and be, so that kept me tampered down and kept me always not getting out of control. And once I did have a man, it just the tape broke on the box, and I just went crazy. And I can look back now after doing this work and seeing those pivotal moments in my life that changed my trajectory pretty quick, and that was one of them. And then we talked about when he called me the other day, and it's probably been a month now. He brought some of that old stuff up, and he talked about they didn't even offer us any help. And I thought, that's a good point.
These days, I think it's probably
this is a problem that you can be given help for. You don't just kick you to the damn curb, especially when you're young. Now the legal system offered me help, and I wouldn't take it. So it's not like I would say something would have changed back then. I know for a fact that when I don't think I could have got well until I did. You weren't going to tell me I had a problem when I was a teenager or 20s or something like that where I was going to take that seriously. Not enough bad stuff had happened yet.
Well, yeah, and I remember when I first got sober, you still kind of want to blame you still want to find a reason why you're so fucked up and nobody else is, you know what I mean? Yeah. And my mom, and I just remember kind of insinuating, if you knew I was so messed up, why didn't you take me to treatment? She was like, you were so angry, you were so full of rage, I couldn't even bring up, go take a shower, you know what I mean, without you being, there was no way you were going to go to anywhere and I just, it's funny how we, it talks about in the big book, we provoke things in our past that then we feel like we're victims of in the moment, but we've sometime in the past provoked that behavior.
Stepped on the toes of our fellows.
And they retaliated. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, so. It is. It is such a weird, I believe it's a disease. It's a mental disease is my closest thing to say to it. It's no different than schizophrenia or bipolar or something like that. There's some wires loose that caused me to never have felt like I was enough. And this parallel in it too of all these stories I get to hear, plus the ones that I listen to on the internet and everything, have this same basic thread.
Yep.
When we get here, we think we're unique.
Yeah.
And then as time goes by, I realize it's almost cookie cutter. My sponsor has been sober quite a while. 37 years, and he works in the field. So he's a outpatient chemical dependency counselor. And he said, we was talking about her today, he's like the addict whisperer. He educates people on this disease, and it rings the bell rather than you hear time and time again where people have heard him, speak about this thing as a disease. And it'd be a turning point in somebody's recovery because finally they heard something that made them quit fighting it, and said, oh, well, okay. And he talks about such a cookie cutter thing of people coming in through the doors and, they're trying to pull the wool over his eyes and trying to, do all the stuff that addicts try to do. And when you're that, tuned, because he is one too.
Yep.
And then you give him that education that he's had from his real education, not to mention the practical application of treating us day in and day out. You don't walk in there and put your mask on and fool him.
Yeah.
But we're this is such the same song and dance all the time. So back to the kicked out of the military, and it was 9/11 was the next day.
9/11 was the next day, and then I carried on that trajectory for a while. I mean, we ended up obviously getting evicted from that apartment
That's definitely an interesting thing too. That everybody getting kicked
Oh
out
my
and then
God.
go, we'll just go move in together.
In
you
this
know, well,
one big, it was
Yeah.
just a party. Oh my God.
They
it's so
defined
bad.
us as the trouble, and they removed all of us, and our wad of trouble just moved over here together.
I'm sure that apartment complex was super happy to have us there. It was so bad. And then, so that went on. I remember I got a job at Walmart, and I mean, I'm not allowed to work at Walmart anymore ever again for the rest of my life. And I just could not keep it together. Like, I couldn't keep it together. I was unemployable, and I was just a hot mess all the time. And at some point, I can't remember. Oh, when I couldn't work at Walmart anymore, this guy named Luke Badalucco, who I found out later had escaped from Rikers Island. He got the shit beat out of him and thrown back in. But I mean, he was one of the only people that had ever successfully escaped and swam across that waterway. But they were waiting for him when he got back on the other side, and they beat the shit out of him and put him back in. But he needed a helper, and so I could not keep a job with any sort of real company. And I remember the guy whose place I was taking said, do you know how to paint and caulk and stuff? And of course I didn't. So I was like, totally, And so when I got hired, it was obvious I didn't know what I was doing. But you know what? It turns out like Luke could use something else for me. You know what I mean? And he was willing to pay me for it. So for a while there, that's what I did for him. I was basically just like his hooker on hand, which is unfortunate, but that's what I remember when I see young ladies come in this room. Like, we have done so many things to shame ourselves so far down. We didn't do that overnight, and it takes a long time to fix some of those behaviors in recovery, to the point where I'm pretty sure I haven't fixed them all even yet at 12 years. And but I did, so I'd met some other painters and stuff, just because we would go to the bar every night, like after we got done working. We would go to the bar and we would meet other people. So I ended up getting a job with a company called Production Painting. And I was on a crew with a guy, Ray, Ned, and Conrad, and they were all like crackheads. I mean, just typical painters. And we were called the short bus. Like, we were the short bus of the company. They probably had like 5 crews, and Ray was the driver. But we'd go paint. They were hard working. They taught me how to paint. They taught me how to work. There was mutual respect, among the crew in its own way. It was sort of autonomous in that way too. Like, that group figured out what law worked. And then we get beer on the way back to the shop, and it was in Virginia Beach. Once I got kicked out of the Navy, I stayed in Virginia Beach. And so we would get back to the shop. We'd have our 6-packs in our backpacks, and I had lost my license because I got a DUI at some point. And so we would just ride our bikes down the beach and drink and party there, wash all the paint off us in the ocean, and then the next day just start all over again. And it was enjoyable in its own way, but I was 21 or 22 at that time. I mean, it was in no way parallel to like women, like girls that I went to high school with and stuff. Like, I was in gifted classes my whole life and everything. Like, what they were doing in their 20s was not. I knew that what I was doing, again, was abnormal behavior for, what societal norms were for me.
Yeah, I have a voice that's been telling me for a long time as I explored a new thing, like a new drug or a new group of friends or some new activity, that nudged me and said, Dan, you probably ought not be doing this.
Yeah, yep.
And but I always overrode that, and then another one of them self-esteem things, because once I went past that point of that true me trying to get my attention, saying, Dan, don't. And I do it anyway.
Yeah,
and there I am, a couple more notches down on the self-esteem ladder, and then I hit a new one and a couple more steps down as I kept on doing stuff that my heart was telling me that I probably shouldn't, this is probably not a good idea. Mm-hmm. Don't take that acid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hang out with these particular people. Mm-hmm. But it's some, but like I said, there's also this other thing in there, like, I can almost like, I gotta be careful because I kind of can romanticize that pretty quick about like, hell, free as a bird, riding down the beach, backpack full of beer, man, taking a bath in the ocean, just.
Yep, I convinced myself it was the life there for a while, and Ned, who it turns out his name was Robert. I knew him for 4 years before he told me his real name was Robert Brooks, but I'd known him as Ned Hill. He had just taken Ned Flanders from The Simpsons and Hank Hill from King of the Hill and made his name Ned Hill. So that's when I had some indication that he was fucking crazy and that I had been like, basically, he had been my mentor for the last 4 years and he was nuts. But, I mean, he was, every Friday he got paid, he would say, I'm getting a rock and a freak. That's what he'd say every Friday. So that's the kind of stuff that I had normalized in my life at that point.
Yeah.
And it's hard to denormalize that stuff, and I have found that now, even in recovery. If left to my own devices, and I'm not practicing these principles in all my affairs, and I'm not inviting God in, I go back to looking for that kind of person. The kind of person that is doing shit that I want to normalize in my life. Even in recovery, and it's some crazy thinking that happens.
Yep.
You know, and so that happened, and then I don't know, life just kind of went on like that for a while. I opened my own painting business because, as in all alcoholics, like I have whatever ideas of grandeur, I have, you know, whatever egomaniac with an inferiority complex. Like at some point, I no longer was gonna take any sort of authority from anyone, you know, and I thought I could do it better.
Yeah. And they're paying me $8 an hour or whatever, you know, but they're getting paid this much. Hell, I'll do it and I'll take the whole thing of it.
Yep, and he's going to tell me I do it. I've been painting for 5 years. I know what I'm fucking doing, you know, so whatever. So I owned my own painting business for a while, but I mean, even in recovery to this day, I'm still working on learning what financial manageability looks like and what lack of fear of financial insecurity looks like. So I did not have it then, and I did not have any understanding of money or business or anything. So I worked a lot. I made a lot of money, but I ultimately ended up going back and working for that guy's competitor in Virginia Beach. But at that point, my boyfriend had left me. You know, he had left me so far as to move to Wyoming from Virginia Beach. Like, yeah, no, he was getting the hell away from the country. And I remember, because every night I would get off that, and if we didn't ride down to the beach, we all just hung out at the shop. Well, it was me, 21, and like 30, 40-year-old dudes, you know, and we just drank, party, but like once or twice a week I would call Bill drunk as shit from the payphone, because this was before cell phones. I did not have a cell phone yet. And I would be like puking and laying in my own vomit on Virginia Beach Boulevard, and he'd have to come get me. I mean, this was once or twice a week. There were times he would make dinner for us, and I would be out smoking crack with whoever, you know, and I wouldn't show up till like 2 a.m. I mean, I just like, I in that time in my life felt like I loved him, but fraught the emotional appeal seldom suffices. It wasn't enough. Loving him, being in the military, having a job, like none of that is enough to keep me from using. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's it. You know, and that's everything. And just we sit here and tell these stories about this crazy, insane stuff we've done.
Yeah.
And then when I got here, that second step about restore me to sanity, I'm not crazy. It's like, let's talk, you know, and had a good sponsor said, oh, okay, let's talk some stories. You don't think that was crazy? Good. Yes, it was.
And it's really, especially like with some time in recovery, like I forget how crazy I was.
Yeah.
I rarely think about drinking again, but I can kind of think, well, maybe I wasn't that bad. Maybe I was just in my 20s, you know what I mean?
So in my wild oats.
Yeah, like, I don't know if I was that crazy.
Yeah, and I watched the friends do that, where I had these friends that drank with me a lot, and I was, in particular, I can think about when everybody else was in college and I was that age.
Yeah.
and you know, they went on with their lives, like, you know, they went to college and got a degree and married their sweetheart and had kids and went on with their lives,
And matured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I wasn't even about to do that,
No.
and I couldn't even see it then. It just meant that, I was going to shift groups of who I'm hanging around with, and this ain't working anymore. They were fun when they were partying.
Yeah.
Once they actually went on with life and put that down, and I didn't, it took until I got here for me to see that. So many things, happened, I say, in the rearview mirror, where I look back and I see how many friends that I had who died from the time I was 14 or 15 years old. Yeah. That looked like suicide and looked like car accidents and looked like other things like that. Those were the two big ones, either car accidents or suicides, that were ultimately alcoholism. I know that's what that was now.
Yeah.
But their disease had progressed past, in a short amount of time or whatever, got worse, bad fast.
Quickly, yeah.
And to the point of committing suicide. And, that's a normal thing in our circles. People kill themselves, whether it's on accident or on purpose, way too damn regularly. And coming here, I was like, oh, I see what that, because I got a dozen friends that I went to school with by the time I was 25 that are not with us any longer, and every single one of them are tied to alcohol or dope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was before the OD days.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody was overdosing.
It was all, just a result of the actual alcoholism. Yeah. Yeah, I remember the guy I went to, another prideful moment for my parents. When I was a sophomore, I went to the senior prom with this guy named Raymond Johnson Jr. He was a senior, but he was 21. My parents were not happy with me. But I wasn't dating him or anything, but we were friends, and he didn't drink and he didn't use like I did. He was sort of my enabler, he got me whatever I wanted, but he just didn't. He was always protective of me. He died when I had about 4 years sober of a heroin overdose. I mean, it just is crazy. I mean, it just doesn't.
Yeah, I can relate to you too. I had the same kind of experiences about embarrassing my folks and my knee. Like when I got kicked off the basketball team, there it was in the paper, and we were all juveniles, and DUIs and other getting picked up for narcotics and stuff. Because here in New Albany, if you got in trouble when I was a kid, your name went in the paper.
Oh, Madison's the same way. Yeah.
And time after time after time, Mom and Dad had the joy of little Dan here making the paper again, and it's no longer for high score of the basketball team.
Yeah.
Because at one point in my life, I had a lot of those articles in
me too.
the New Albany Tribune. But the tables turned. I tell that one of the things is that when I finally ended up getting the big charges for breaking in the house and stealing pills, my name, that never made it to the paper.
Wow.
And the only thing I can tell is, some turning point, and I call it a miracle too, that, that last time Mom and Dad were spared
the pain,
that embarrassment and pain from their now 45-year-old son.
Yeah.
Still making the paper.
Yeah.
And I was scared to death of that. I remember I would look in the paper every single day for that to come out.
I mean, that was the primary reason I stayed in Virginia Beach when I got kicked out of the Navy, because I liked the anonymity. I did not want my name in the Madison paper anymore. I mean, to the point Mom was still calling me and telling me whose name was in the Madison paper. You know what I mean? Like, she still does.
It's kind of a little protective thing on both sides. You're sparing your parents of that.
Yeah.
And you can kind of be, like you said, anonymous in a bigger city like that, where my name makes the paper, no big deal.
Yep. Nobody knows. Nobody knows who you are. Yeah, it's crazy. So I don't know what happened. That was okay. So then I did another geographical cure. The boyfriend moved to Wyoming. My business had gone under, and I was just working $13 an hour. And my sister had moved to Maryland, to D.C., Maryland, D.C. area, but it was in Annapolis. And so it was just another geographical cure. And that time I truly convinced myself, like, I won't go to the places I know where I can get stuff, I'll stay home, I'll be good. So, I moved there, and she said I could live in her attic for 2 months and, until I found a job and all that stuff. Well, I would sit up in the attic and play guitar and read and smoke weed, and I thought, like, this is manageable. Like, this is fine, this is a manageable life. But I mean, it didn't take very long. It felt like a long time. It probably was like 2 weeks. The hamster started running, right? Like, if I, and it started out with like, well, I mean, I can't be up here and not be social forever, you know what I mean? And so I went to some shitty bar. It was Crofton Cantina or something. It was so bad. And basically just spent my entire time in the bathroom doing cocaine off the toilet. And then I went to so then my sister and her husband got divorced in the midst of all this. And so she was going through a big depression. We went to this crappy bar on the other end of town, and the Perry's was the bar up top, was just a shitty bar. But then there was like a shittier bar called Odie's underneath, and like that's where all the cokeheads were, it was just gross down there. And that's like, I felt right at home there. And she ended up hooking up with the cook that worked up at Perry's. Well, she ended up getting pregnant, my niece is now I'm turning 12 in a couple weeks. And and the thing is, that guy, he came into our lives, and like my ex-husband ended up sponsoring him and stuff, because he was in and out. He was a crackhead, in and out, in and out, in and out. And at this point, as of today, he went missing like 4 years ago, and they've never seen him again. And he had done it before in Baltimore, but so my sister married another man who, Maddie knows that that's not her dad, but for all intents and purposes, that's her dad.
Yeah.
And it all worked out and whatever, but I just remember the one thing about Jason, who was her baby daddy, I remember, is that he was a Jehovah's Witness, which there's nothing wrong with that. You can have whatever religious affiliation you want, but he was the first person that I ever met in recovery that had such a specific idea of God he could not get with the God of your own understanding. He couldn't. He wouldn't. He refused. And so I'm not saying that's why he died, but in my mind, he wasn't open-minded. Like, that's a huge part of this thing, right? Like, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness to try. And even if he had the other two, he just could not get with that.
Yep, over and over again. It's one of the points that I talk about whenever I'm working with a guy new. All the little areas in there where it says it says in some way or another, you got to let go of your old ideas. And it says that specifically in one spot. Yeah. That we have to be able to do that. And it's not to say that your system is faulty. I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah.
It's just not working.
It's not working. Like, if it worked, you wouldn't be smoking crack behind the 7-Eleven. So.
Yeah. Somebody told me this one point, and it's the two hardest people in the world to sponsor are the atheist and the born-again Christian.
Oh, my gosh. Because
neither one of them are willing to look at any other new thing. They don't have any open-mindedness.
That's hard to deal with, in recovery, like, there's got to be some willingness to realize that what you're doing is not working, like you said.
And you know what I even say, I say, look, you might just circle all the way back around to that being your higher power later on. But for whatever reason, the price of admittance is to let all that go for a little bit and look at it differently. It seems to be a requirement. Rarely do I see if you can't have that level of open-mindedness, this thing just can't find its way in you.
Nope. Yep.
So I hear what you're saying about that. Yeah, I don't have any experience with Jehovah's Witnesses at all, but they definitely have they're known to have their specific
view of God,
dogma that they stay with.
Mm-hmm. And so it was near my bottom. I had a job I had gotten a job as a maintenance tech at this big apartment complex in College Park, Maryland. They built a brand new one right by University of Maryland. It was 508 units, right by the IKEA, and it had all indoor hallways. The whole 1.8 miles of indoor hallways. So they needed a painter. So it just so happened I had met the maintenance supervisor at a bar one day just by happenstance, and he kept meeting up with me every 2 weeks, which I thought was weird. But he always had his wife with him, so it didn't feel like he was like being weird. And eventually he offered me a job. But to get that job, I had to pass a piss test. I forgot about this. So I was living with this lady who drank a lot but never used drugs. And I just could not, I knew the piss test was coming, but I just could not stay off the drugs, any drugs. And so I had her, I remember, I stayed off of everything for like 5 days, so I thought I was okay. I mean, I was a miserable piece of shit, but
gritting your teeth for 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, I could drink at night or whatever, but I mean, I was just miserable. And so I went and took the piss test, but because I was so nervous about it, I drank a bunch of that clean your piss out stuff, the detox stuff. That's like, it's so gross. But I drank a bunch of it. And so that night I went out and I took all the drugs. Like, I got all the drugs and I took them all.
The night before?
No, the night, like, I got the piss test. I went and took the piss test. That night I just was like, yeah, and I just went out and I did all the drugs. Yeah. About 3 o'clock the next day, I get a phone call on my flip phone, because this was like before iPhones. And it's my to-be boss. And he said, you're going to have to go back to the piss test place. Your piss was too clear.
Yeah, diluted it.
Yeah, you have to re-piss. And I was like, no. Nope. That's not fucking happening. Sorry. You know what I mean? And he was like, well, you got to. I'll come get you. I was like, fuck. So I went out and talked to the girl I was living with, and she peed in a condom, and I popped it up inside myself, and I got there. And that's how I got that job.
Wow.
I had a safety pin on my zipper, and I had that condom that I put up inside me, and I just squeezed it out in the cup, and so, like, oh my God, talk about, like, incomprehensible demoralization. It's, like, crazy. But I got that job, and it was a good job. It came with good benefits. They had, like, a education reimbursement program where they always reimbursed me in case, as long as I kept my, like, average as a C. So I got my associate's degree while I was working there and everything. But anyways, but I worked there about a year before I got sober. So for that whole time, I mean, I was up all night doing cocaine and shit until like 6 a.m. I would sleep, do that thing where I'm like, if I go to sleep now, I get an hour and a half before I go to work. Well, I spent that first year, most of the time, sleeping in a closet in that 508 unit property. Lucky I didn't get fired. Yeah. But anyway, so I just remember I was doing that every night. And at this point, my sister was about 5 to 6 months pregnant near the end of my run there. And I was still living in her attic, but I was paying her rent at the time because her husband had left and stuff. And but I was still bringing all those people from the bar there every night, like every night after the bar closed, every morning we were always there. Over. Yeah, using grandma's mirror, whatever. I mean, just real crazy shit. And so I remember the last night, like I was already getting to the point because the Francois, he was not as fancy as he sounds, but he was the bartender at Odie's in that downstairs bar. Well, he was the one that kept my pockets stocked. I mean, he always came up and gave me packages. But, I mean, he required his own form of payment that I was willing to give. He was married and everything. And I wasn't attracted to him at all, but that didn't matter, at all. And but at some point, the tables turned, and I remember one night I got myself like an 8-ball or something, and he was like, dude, I'm out of money, like, hook me up. I was like, nah, nah, And so I just remember I went up into my little attic that I was living in at my sister's, and at this point, like, I didn't even want to go down to see her to go to the bathroom, so I had one of her kitchen pots that I was peeing in every night because I just didn't even want to go down there and make eye contact with another human being because I was just so disgusted with myself. And so I did that whole 8-ball that night, but I remember, like, the last line, like, I remember thinking, like, this is going to kill me. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to die. Like, I was already, like, my heart was about ready to explode. But I didn't die. But I just remember that being, like, even this wasn't enough to fucking make me feel okay. Like, even this isn't enough. And now, what else had happened simultaneously is the geographical cure had happened. I'd met these cool people at this bar. They all thought I was cool. They thought I had some character. They thought I was a good person. The veil had been lifted, and the truth is, I'm just a big black hole I'll use whatever means necessary to take what you have. Well, that gig was up. And so it's just another group of people that knew I was just fucking nothing except for an addict. So, but at this point, I'd never really been introduced to the program. I went to one NA meeting when I got kicked out of the Navy and, like, held it hostage for, like, 25 minutes, like every newcomer, you know what I mean? Yeah. For my weed problem or whatever, and then, like, left. But So that next day, I came home from, I guess I was at work the next day. It was a Tuesday. I came home and I just like basically vomited this fifth step on my sister. And I said, like, this is the shit that's going on. You know, this is what's happening. Like, this thing with Francois and like all this shit. I just vomited it all out there. And I truly believed, I was 28 years old. I truly believed that she was my sister. I'd done all the things with her at some point. You know, she wasn't no angel. But I really thought she was going to be like, chalk it up to your 20s. Like, dust yourself off. You get back up. We all go through it. Blah, blah, blah. You know, but when I got done talking, and this girl's from my same gene pool and background and everything. I mean, her jaw was on the floor. She said, Lindsay, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, I've never done any of that stuff. And so everybody's moment of clarity, like, looks different, but that was my moment of clarity. That was the moment where I realized that all this shit that I had normalized in my life and surrounded myself with people that made this seem like normal behavior, it was not normal behavior. Like, the gig was up right then. Like, I realized, like, I needed to do something different. So, like, to me, that was the first time. I'm sure God had planted many thoughts in my head over the years, but this was the first one that I truly believe must have been planted there by him, because I'd never had any experience in recovery. And what came out of my mouth was like, maybe I need to go to AA or NA or something. And so she's like, now Chris is of the, you know, Charlie Sheen sort of mentality. Like, she definitely thinks AA is a cult, but she cares more about me than she cared about that. So she didn't say any of those words that night. She printed me out of where and when, and she, like, put little highlights and stars next to the meetings she knew I could get to with my schedule. And so it was crazy. That was a Tuesday night, and I used that day. So Wednesday there was a meeting at this place called, on Tuesday night, I went to a meeting that she had, like, a little star thing by. It just so happened there was no meeting that night. So, like, that first 24 hours, I white-knuckled it. I didn't have the solution of the steps. I didn't have the solution of the book. And then I also didn't have the solution of the fellowship, which in early recovery is all you fucking got.
It sure does, yeah.
It's all you got.
I'm so thankful for the buckets of hope was poured on me early on, because that's the only thing that got me day to day.
Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes when I'm resting on my laurels, what gets me through to the next time I'm ready to do the fucking work. It's crazy, you know? Yep. And so, so that next night was Wednesday night. And at this point, I was maintenance. I hadn't showered in weeks. And my boss bought me toothpaste and a toothbrush because I didn't have enough money to buy any. And I mean, it had been months. And I'm sure for his own...
Yeah. It's like I had to get this girl some basic hygiene here.
Yeah, because she's killing me, dude. She's killing me. And and how I didn't lose my job, like, I truly believe that was God was...
Yeah, something divine going on there.
Something happening there. And so that Wednesday, there was a 7 o'clock meeting. I think it was at South Shore Recovery Club, which is kind of like a token club here, but they didn't have like a concession stand and stuff. It was just a place. There was always meetings. But, you know, it was before smartphones, and so I freaking printed out a MapQuest, and I couldn't find it because it was like this weird little turn-off, so I was late to the first meeting.
So a lot of times meeting houses and stuff are in these little weird places that don't look like where they...
Yeah,
like make them real easy to find usually.
AA, like a big flashing sign that like, AA here. Yeah. There's none of that going on.
Yeah.
And, and it was on a MapQuest thing, so I just kept driving by it, and it's just like, ugh. So I went in there, I was late, I hadn't showered, I tried to chop some wood with a newly sharpened hatchet like a few days before, but I was completely wasted, and it slipped off the top of the wood and sliced my foot in half, so I had like one of my sister's curtains from the garage wrapped around my toe and flip-flops when I went into that first meeting. Yeah. I always say I tried to give myself a pedicure with a hatchet. Like, it was bad. And so I was just rough. It was rough. And
you ring a lot of bells on me, and that's a funny thing about sitting here is that one of the things about doing the podcast is like it brings back memories of things that I kind of set aside, you know, because I was cutting asparagus down with a machete one time, loaded, you know, hung over essentially.
Yeah.
But probably was on something else and slipped and just basically chopped my foot off with the machete. I didn't chop it off, but I laid into it and I damn near chopped my big toe off.
Oh my gosh.
And, you know, and it takes later on, you know, I know that shit don't happen sober, right? And even though I wasn't like, it was in the morning. But so yeah, it's interesting that because now when you see somebody dragging their ass in, you know, in those kind of positions, you know, you never know. You know, the person comes in at night and they got sunglasses on, they take them off, they got two black eyes, you know, it's any number of things the way we come dragging our asses into a meeting and
oh my God.
go here after just a small accident with a hatchet.
Oh my God, yeah. All right. And that's why I have to be careful not to get so much time that I forget. I mean, that's why working with newcomers is so crucial because keeps me remembering why I don't want to go back there again.
Yep. I know for a fact that if it wasn't for that, then my brain has already proven to me a number of times through my stumbles in AA of getting a start and stopping and getting, you know, that I have to be in the middle of it. I can't play around on the perimeter or outside edges.
No,
I have to be in the middle of it.
No, yeah, I mean, my sponsor when I first got sober was I never understood what she meant, that I had the gift of desperation, because my experience was the only experience I had. But since I've been sober now, like, not everybody has that when they come in, and it takes a long time, and some people never make it, and it's sad to watch, you know. So it truly was a gift. I just didn't feel like it at the time, you know.
How'd that first meeting go with that? I mean, that night.
So that meeting was called The Wrath of Grapes, and this crazy girl, The Wrath of Grapes, this crazy girl named Beth, who was crazy. She smoked like 8 million cigarettes a day, and she talked like this. She's a pretty girl, but she was just rough. And this guy named Fred, who was at my wedding, you know, 5 years later. I mean, they were at the front leading the meeting, but it all was sort of so foreign to me. I didn't really understand what was going on, and I was late, so I felt uncomfortable. But I don't really remember what the meeting was about, but I do, at the very end, they asked, does anybody have 24 hours or less or a desire for a new way of life? And again, I didn't know what that meant because I hadn't been there, but I knew that it applied to me. So I was sobbing when I went up there and got my first chip, and it was, the tears were because, again, my pride had gotten to the point where I realized this was the last house on the block, and I truly believed it wasn't going to work for me because my pride is so gigantic, and everywhere I go I take myself with me. So I was certain AA was going to be another failed attempt at trying to do something different. But I went up there and got that 24-hour chip, and I had spent my entire life at that point with dirty old men. So I went to the first dirty old man I saw as soon as the meeting ended. Oh, but I will say, at that first meeting, everybody held hands and said the Lord's Prayer, which I didn't know the words to, because my dad's an atheist, my mom's social churchgoer, you know what I mean? And so they said the Lord's Prayer, and the unity that I felt at that moment, I just remember thinking, like, I want to learn that so that I'm a part of. It was the first thing that I was like, God, it would be cool to know that so that I could be a part of what everybody else is doing. I got cold chills just thinking about it.
Yeah, me too. I just thought, you know, same time, first meeting I went to, you know, got court ordered to some meetings when I was young from DUIs and stuff, but I have absolutely no memory of them other than I know one of them was right down here in New Albany. I know where I was at.
Yeah.
Now I spoke there, right?
Yeah.
But at the time I didn't. But then that night on, it was March 26th of 2011, which is 4 years before my current sobriety date. So,
wow.
But I remember when they held hands and said the Lord's Prayer, I was crying.
Wow.
But the group really poured a lot of hope on me that night because I did the dumb stuff that newcomers do, like when they said, is anybody first AA meeting? You know, I didn't know what that was going to mean, but it applied to me, like you said. And then they did that pause that what I know today is to see if anybody else is just slow raising their hand, right? Mm-hmm. You know, give everybody a minute and there's that pause. Well, I didn't know that's what that was. And mistaked it for that I was supposed to say some stuff. And so I was pretty brief. I didn't go on the whole newcomer hold hostage thing,
Yeah.
but I was real brief about it. But I said, I'm 3 days sober, and just laid out where I was at the moment,
Yeah.
and that allowed them all to have some ammunition to pour back on me. So God did something there and made me, that because I shared, because I opened myself up a little bit, that allowed the group to open up
Oh, no
to
doubt.
me and pour a lot of hope into me. And I remember I cried a number of times that night and and just beat up. But, I still wasn't, I got a year of sobriety out of that run,
Yeah.
but I put everything down. A little over a year later, man, I conquered this thing and didn't need this shit no more. And that's what I mean about my history. I know that putting it down and resting on my laurels got me in more trouble than I was in the first place. I went in off basically a bad weekend. It was just a bad weekend. Was what had me in there in March of 2011.
Yep.
Just a regular old bad weekend. And 4 years later, I'm in there because I'm scared to death that I'm going to go to prison for 6 to 20 years.
Wow.
But I hear you back on that. That there's some power in those places that's unknown, and you don't have to know a thing about it to feel it. Like you said, you don't have to know the prayer. You don't have to be able to understand any of the 12 speakees that we use in there. But you can tell something is going on in here. And one of two things happens. Either your disease is ready to pack bags and get the fuck out.
Yep.
Or you're attracted and think, hey, this might be
Maybe.
something I want.
Yeah, and you said something that I remember when I share now, I realize, but didn't realize then that, even though I looked terrible when I went in that first meeting, and I looked rough, and I'm sure everybody could be like, girl, need some help. You know what I'm saying? When I went up there and got that 24-hour chip, it let everybody know that I was willing to accept some help, and I believe that's a huge part of it,
It's these little things we do like that means so much. We'll be some new guy, and I'll tell him, we're going to go to your first AA meeting tonight, and I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go by yourself, because I know how hard it is to walk in there by yourself. And then okay, here's what's going to happen. They're going to ask if anybody's first time at AA, and you should raise your hand.
Yeah.
And at the end, they're going to say, hey, does anybody want a white chip? And you should go up and get one. And and try to hold their hand a little bit through that process.
Because it is scary as shit.
Yeah, but it does. There's that walking up there getting that white chip means a whole lot more than just going and getting that white chip.
Yeah.
That you have when I get a chance to give away chips, this is a demonstration to the universe, to the people in this room, and to yourself that you're ready for some change. Yeah.
Yep.
And once you do that, they were able to start, I'm sure what people were talking to you after a meeting, right?
Well, I went up to Frankie, who, I knew later,
Is this the dirty old man?
because he stayed sober, but that first meeting, that was my comfort level. So I went right up to him, and I always say this, but I'm sure it's one of two things. He was either working a program that day or, unwilling to deal with my hygiene situation at the moment. But either way, he escorted me to the group of women that had some time in that group, and those women, there was a gaggle of them is the best I can describe it. There was probably 6 or 7 of them, and they all had different ranges of time. Probably the girl that had the most time maybe had 10 years, and there were some people that didn't have much more time than me, but I remember I went up to them, and, they were like, oh, so happy you're here, keep coming back, and, I was just, disgustingly antisocial by that time, you know what I mean? And I just was I remember, though, saying, so I've been to this meeting, so am I good for a while? And they were like, hell no, girl. You should go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I'm grateful that there are some suggestions that are not in the big book, because obviously the big book, there wasn't 90 meetings in 90 days really to go to when they wrote that. But that was something that was super helpful to me, and I broke all the traditions. I was going to CDA, which is Chemical Dependent Anonymous. I was going to NA. I was going to AA. My first year, I was like a attention whore. At my first year celebration, I celebrated all 3 of those. I went to celebrate recovery, but I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. But I fucked it all up. But I remember.
Well, I don't know like you said, it doesn't say 90 and 90. I don't know that it means 90 AA meetings. You know, get your ass in a meeting. I don't care if you're at an overeaters meeting.
Yeah, that's true. I think I actually went to an overeaters meeting one time.
I would support that.
Yeah,
I would. I mean, any of that over
not
skipping one day.
Yep.
Because, golly, it is just so hard. Day by day, man, to do that. And that's what, like, when the TVs used to go off in the middle of the night, and there'd be them rainbow-colored stripes and bars, and it would just be static. You know, just be going, that static would be what I woke up with every morning. And that static would get louder and louder and louder, and I knew one way to turn it off. Put some in me. But I found that going to a meeting turned it down. Manageable, and I could make it to the morning, and then the volume would come up again. And I remember that, you know, again, it's hindsight, it's rearview mirror stuff, but day after day after day, and, you know, gradually that static started getting quieter. You know, and golly, it helped, you know.
And I equate it to like my addict voice as opposed to my God voice. Like, as your God voice was getting stronger, your addict voice was getting less, right? But even in recovery, sometimes the balance shifts sometimes. Depending on the maintenance of my spiritual condition.
I can turn around sometimes, and that noise is as loud as ever. You know, and,
just don't have it.
You're sober, you know, and working a program and doing a lot, putting a bunch of my life energy into recovery life. And I can spin around and have that static as loud as ever.
That's been my recent experience, and I think. I mean, I'm not blaming the whole COVID situation, but COVID definitely changed what I was doing for AA, and therefore it inadvertently, I didn't realize it was happening, but it changed the way I was working my program. Like, it was so subtle that I didn't know it was happening until I realized I was making a bunch of alcoholic decisions with 12 years sober. you know, so it's crazy.
I mean, we are not cured.
No.
What we have is a daily reprieve.
So then what happened was...
I love those newcomer stories. It's because we see them happen again, right?
Yeah.
You know, and listening to yours, I like that.
So those women, Melody was the one who had the most time. And
I love that you remember their names, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, she was in my life when I left Maryland 7 years later. You know, a lot of them were. It's really... Because when I got sober, that's what everybody kept telling me. Stick with the winners. Well... The winners are the people that are jumping over chairs to get to the newcomers before they get out of the room. And that's how you can tell who the fucking winners are. And that's who you need to stick with. And so Melody, she told me later on, I also think it's funny because, okay, so they all gave me like their business cards and shit, you know what I mean? But I could tell by what they had shared in the meeting that they weren't always the way they are now. But they weren't in the current state that I was in. So... It was enough to intrigue me. They gave me their business cards and shit, and they're like, okay, just, keep coming back and call me if, you need a ride or anything. And I had a car, but for whatever reason, that next day, I called Melody, and her and this other girl came and picked me up. It wasn't until 6 months later, she said, well, I didn't ever tell you this, but now that you're more emotionally stable, I'll tell you. Every time you called me for a ride, I would go pick somebody else up first before I picked you up because I thought you were an axe murderer. That's what she told me.
That's good, though. I mean, we tell you, don't go on 12-step calls by yourself.
No,
take
absolutely.
a friend. Go take somebody with you.
Yeah.
So she was working a program in that way.
She was. Oh, I had about 4 months sober. And I had a sponsor named Patty, and she was great. She had like 22 years, and she loved me until I could love myself. She was my sponsor my first 5 years. But I remember I met this girl named Cindy at a meeting, and by then, I had 4 months sober. I was like super AA, like had my cape on and everything, and just, gonna save the world. And on fire for AA, as they say. And so that girl Cindy called me about a week later, and I forgot, but she called on a Tuesday night at like 2 a.m. Fucking wasted. And, I put on my AA cape and I flew on over there to her house, and dumped out her alcohol and gave her my big book. And, I was super proud of myself. That moth's driving me nuts, huh?
Yeah.
So I was super proud of myself, and so... the next day, I called my sponsor. Guess what I did? Like, I'm so excited. I'm so proud of myself, and I'm going to tell you all about it. And so I told the story. And when we got done, there was like that awkward sponsor pause, and she was like, so do you think that was the best idea? And I was like, I was so, felt like I was so entitled to some, like, attaboy, and then, like, here she is, like, questioning what I'm doing, and I was like, well, yeah, I'm supposed to carry this message to the next suffering alcoholic. She was like, yeah, but her disease is stronger than your solution in that kind of one-on-one ring. And I said, well, what was I supposed to do? And she was like, well, you could have called somebody in recovery to go on that 12-step call with you. And I said, nobody was going to want to get up at 2 a.m. And she said, if they're working a program, they would have gone on that 12-step call with you. But I just remember when she initially was like, do you think that was the best idea? I was like, oh yeah, I could have gone over there, and there could have been a guy behind the door with a bat, and he could have, hit me in the head. And she was like, yeah, or you could have drank. And I was just like, that was the first time. But I believe I said something like, bitch, and hung up the phone that time because I didn't like being reprimanded for something I felt I deserved some accolades for.
Yeah. And still here down the road a little bit, once in a while, and I still hate it, man. And everything inside of me rejects it when my sponsor suggests that maybe I could have done something different.
Yeah.
Motherfucker, I'm 6 years sober.
Don't tell me. Yeah. Oh, I know. It's so hard. And I have a sponsor that is very, she's not like my first sponsor. My first sponsor, like I said, was kind and soft and easy with me. And she asked me my motives and my questions. But, like, now I have a sponsor that very clearly states her experience, strength, and hope as it applies to the exact situation I'm dealing with. And sometimes I'm just not in a place where I can handle it, and I get defensive. Those character defects are very real inside of me.
Thank God my sponsor knows me.
Yeah.
And gives me some latitude when I get my hackles up. And I also have learned to pause
when agitated or doubtful.
And so instead of saying something stupid, I just, okay, sponsor, and I'll just listen.
I'm at about a 50% success rate with the pause when agitated and doubtful. Like, I feel like I was at like 12% for the majority of my recovery. So, progress. Yeah. Spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. So, so let's see what else. Okay, so that was the first meeting. And so I went to the 90 meetings in 90 days. And in the midst of all that, they were having these meetings like at people's houses. And that's where I met my sponsor. It was at her cousin's house, and it was like this big mansion. And again, still, I hadn't showered. It is like now a week further into recovery. I still hadn't showered, still looking rough, still showing up to meetings, rough. But they invited me. And she came up to me and said, look, I had a pretty dry spell here in recovery. I haven't sponsored anybody in 5 years. My sponsor said I needed to come up to you and take you on as my sponsee. She said, because she said you're flapping out here like a windsock, you know what I mean? Like, just flapping in the breeze, and that I'm just going to let go one of these days and get back out there. And so she said, I'll be your temporary sponsor, so that it wasn't too much pressure, right?
Right.
Be your temporary sponsor. And everybody has their own opinion about this stuff, too. Like, you should be responsible for your own recovery. You need to go ask for a sponsor. That just wasn't my experience. Because I was overcomplicating the shit out of it, I remember sitting in all these meetings thinking, do I need to turn in an application for a sponsor? And, like, are they going to reject or deny me based, like, and I didn't even want to go ask for the application.
The chance of getting rejected.
Oh, it was terrible.
Killed me. Yeah, and I didn't ask my sponsor to sponsor me either. One day after a share, when I finally told the truth, kind of like walked in the meeting, and I've been going to these meetings and telling everybody I'm fine.
Yeah,
I've been because I've been going to AA for 4 years.
Yeah,
I'm just in more trouble than ever, and
just having a hard time applying it.
Yeah, and I did that, and then one day my court come loose because I was wrestling around with something, was all restless, irritable, discontent all day, man, and my court come out, and that night this guy who I would have loved to had the balls to ask me to sponsor it, and he's the guy I wanted.
Yeah,
he's the guy who shared every single time, and that's who I wanted, but I didn't have the guts to ask him. He walks up to me after the meeting and says, hey, I want to be your sponsor.
Wow.
Yeah, and I walked out there that night. I still remember like it was yesterday, of walking out of that church and looking at the sky. And again, this is rearview mirror stuff, but walking out of that church, looking at the sky, knowing something just shifted for me.
Wow.
So yeah, and
That's
you're right.
a God
Everybody
job
does
for
have
sure.
everybody does have their different opinions on how to go about that, and everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Each person's experience is the only thing.
Yeah. And you might get nudged to do something that you think is wrong. You've been, really, same way we got trained in this normalization about what you thought was okay, and we get the same thing here.
Yep.
We get this taught according to however our lineage is and how their sponsor taught them and so forth and so on about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And you walk into a situation and I get nudged to tell some guy I'm going to be a sponsor. That's not what I've been taught.
No,
right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
say, hey, man, you need some help.
Yep.
And I'm wanting to help you.
And that's what happened. And she said, read the first 164 pages of the big book. And I said, I don't think I can do that quickly. And she said, just because of the way my brain was at the time, like the fog was so heavy. And she said, just read as much as you can every day and call me every day. And I didn't understand why she wanted me to call her every day. And of course, like all newcomers, convinced myself that it's because she needed friends, she wanted me as a friend. So I'll just do her a favor and I'll call her every day. And
poor girl,
poor thing. Yeah, but I remember calling her from payphones. That's when I got sober. I remember calling her from payphones and stuff. And then, and I would call her every day, but still the conversations were real lame. Hey, how are you today? I'm all right. Anything happened today? I'm I don't know. Went to work. I'm all right. Whatever. And, so she'd be like, okay, well, call me tomorrow. And I'd be like, okay, and so I would call her the next day. But what that did for me, the chip situation in retrospect, I'd been calling her every day for about 2 weeks. And inevitably, because I no longer had the solution of the drink, my solution was completely gone. Now all I was relying on was the fellowship of AA. Inevitably, I completely had some sort of emotional meltdown, rage-filled meltdown, somewhere about 2 weeks in. And it didn't even cross my mind who to call because I'd been calling this lady every day for 2 weeks. So it was it was just like intuition. I just picked up the phone, called her, and she came and picked me up. Yeah, it became a habit. And she picked me up and took me to a meeting, and I survived that day. You know what I'm saying? And about a month in, or month and a half in, she said, are you done stewing in your own juices? Do you want to get to work and get this shit done? And remember, the first step for me was easy because, like I said, it was very clear to me from a very young age that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol and that my life was unmanageable. I didn't need any further proof. I had done enough experimentation to realize that was a true statement. So step one was easy for me. But because my dad was an atheist and because he was an agnostic most of my life, but he's now an atheist, but there's a lot of stigma with God in my house. It's just relying on anybody but yourself is considered a weakness. Intellectually, scientifically, and mentally and emotionally. All those things are considered a weakness. So I had a hard time, but I do remember praying as a child, praying for my family and praying for my pets and stuff. And so there was, like it talks about in the big book, there was some fundamental belief in God that I had from a very young age, regardless of what I learned.
Yep, but it was blocked.
Yeah, it was blocked by social norms and things.
Pomp and pomp and something and worship of other things.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely got stepped on, and I do believe fully that fundamentally inside us there is something that wants to reach out to something outside of us.
Yeah.
That what you want to call God, whatever. There's a thing, and I think it's people have been doing it on cave walls on opposite sides of this globe forever.
Yeah.
And there's no way that happens if there's not some thing either programmed into us for it or if it's not real.
Prove it.
Either one. It's definitely there. And another thing I like to say, and I heard it from somebody else, is that for the most part, there's probably some exceptions, but when your car is careening off the side of the road, or your child is in the hospital, or bullets are flying over your foxhole, we get cornered in those. Everybody's going, God help me.
Yeah, foxhole prayers. Yep, that is
So the second step is, I think, where you were going with, having a real trouble with a God word, or it didn't even.
It was that he could
To
restore.
believe that he didn't even say God.
Yeah,
but we know what it means.
Yeah, it was. I really had a hard time with the idea that if he was omniscient, if he was all-knowing, and he knew everything that I'd done, but he also knew everything that I had thought and everything that my intentions. I mean, what my actions were about half as bad as what my thoughts and my intentions were. So I thought if he knew all that, like, he had turned away from me like everybody else had. Like, if he probably was real, but him being willing to, like, help me at this point, if he knew all that stuff about me, was highly unlikely.
Yeah, we've been let down long enough, and you let me get here.
Yeah.
And, well, you really going to pull me back?
Yeah, I mean, if he knows that I'm all fucked up, he doesn't want to help me,
Cross that line,
Yeah.
We get the teachings early on about that line. Is it real,
Yeah.
You do this stuff and you go to hell, and
yeah,
kind of miss the point about redemption.
Yeah.
But,
and that he's forgiving, forgiving because we're human.
Yeah.
And so, she made me read in the middle of step 2. She made me read "Came to Believe," which was just another book with short stories in it about people's experiences coming to believe.
Coming to believe, yeah.
And by the time I read that book, I realized I was overcomplicating it. All I had to do was believe that it's possible that something could restore me to sanity. That I knew in and of myself I couldn't restore myself to sanity. So all I had to do was believe. And I remember my sponsor telling me a story, which I just always remember because it was during that whole thing, because she was struggling with the God concept when she got sober. And she was in a institution of some sort, and like she was talking to her therapist, and she was saying, like, I don't believe in God, whatever. And so they looked out the window, and there was a flower bush out there. And there was like all these hummingbirds all flying around it. And she said, and the therapist asked her, like, do you believe that man made that bush? And she said, no, that's ridiculous. And she said, and the therapist said, do you believe that man made those hummingbirds? And she said, no, that's ridiculous. She's like, well, then can you believe that there's something greater than you that could do that? And she said, yes. So that was enough for her. And that's what I learned from that story was, like, I just needed to crack the door with my willingness, and God would open it the rest of the way. Like, I literally just had to be willing enough to crack that door open. And I remember that around that time, and it's very strange. It may have been right when I got sober, because I'm not a religious person. But when I was up in my sister's attic, I remember being on my knees, like, praying for the first real time. And I think it was a little before the second step. It was when I was still very newly sober. But I was on my knees, like, just taking suggestion, like, just praying.
They said pray, okay.
Yeah. Thank him, like, in the morning, ask God to keep you sober. At night, thank God for keeping you sober. Like, just do whatever. And I just remember, looking up, and it had, like, the attic had 2 parts, but the light was in the other room, and then there was my door, and then the light shone in. And there was a shadow of what even saying it is almost, like, sort of embarrassing to me because of how I was raised, but the shadow seemed to be, like, in the image of Jesus, which was very strange to me. And I was like, my eyes are playing tricks on me. So I got up and I went in that room, and I mean, the light was right there, but there was nothing in front of it. There was nothing between that and the door. And although I never had, like, a spiritual experience which struck me sober, that was one of those things that I felt sort of a warm, comforting feeling from that time forward, which I felt was, I don't know, that those kind of things for me are weird to talk about.
I know, I hate to talk about them too, man. I talk about a lot of things that I call miracles, not any less than whenever the guy come up and said, I want to sponsor you, when I wanted him to do it, wanted him to do it. Basically, I was praying for him to do it at some level, because it was in my head.
Yep.
And all of a sudden the prayer come true, and I didn't do it. That's and I don't know if we were on the air or not when I said that, but those God nods, God winks, those things,
we were.
you know, I think that's what that is.
Yep.
You know, that was one of these ones, and it helps you come to believe, because those things put pennies or marble. If you listen to Brene Brown, I always used to talk about the marble jar.
Yeah.
You got to put, it puts a marble in the jar.
Yeah.
And on the come to believe scale.
Yep.
So yeah, there's you know, and Bill had it happen.
Yeah.
In the big book. Can you imagine? You know, me and you had trouble talking about it here. Imagine how hard time he had willing to tell that story, that he got struck sober in a treatment center, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm. So that's cool. I like it, and I do believe it.
Yeah, and then so you know, I went on with the steps, and that first 4 step, I wasn't scared. Okay, so that gift of desperation, my sponsor. I have to tell this part of it because she was very clear early on that it wasn't in the big book, but that she suggested that I not get into a relationship or spend any time with men alone for the first year of sobriety. And I was not happy about that, you know, but she kind of was, you know, saying, like, if you can give me one example of a healthy relationship that you've ever been in, like, not just romantic, just any healthy relationship you've ever been in, I'll lift that suggestion. And I mean, of course, I was just like, So I did, and I was so desperate that I did do what she asked me to do. And that's why when I share my story, and when I sponsor women, that was my experience. And that's all I have is my experience. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or whatever. Everybody has their own opinion about that, and it works for some people, it doesn't work for some people, but my experience is it kept me sober that first year.
Yep. That book says, we shall tell you what we have done.
Yep.
And you are simply telling them what you did.
Exactly. And so I didn't get into a relationship that first year. I spent time alone with one man, and it almost went, like, it doesn't matter because I'm looking for a Band-Aid. Like, I had a big gaping wound of pain, and I just wanted anything to make me feel better. So I, like, immediately cut that off before it turned into something that was going to become my higher power, because I'm just incapable, when I'm not on fit spiritual footing, to focus on me and God. I just am incapable. So, you know, I went through my 4-step, and like I said, my sister, Chris, was 4 pages front and back of that first 4 steps. She was the most. And what I found, you know, by the time I got to my faults, was that if I would have ever been okay with myself, like, I would never have been so mad at her for being who she was. It wasn't about her. It was about how she made me feel about myself. And that has followed me throughout recovery with different people. And it is sometimes harder for me it takes me longer to grasp on that that's why my character defects are coming out, you know. But in my mom and my dad and I mean, we all get along. I'm very grateful. Nobody in our family has ever, like, disowned anybody. We spend holidays together and stuff. But my dad and I are both very hard-headed. I would say he... I don't know if he's an alcoholic, but definitely alcohol has been a huge part of his life and our life growing up, and affected the way I felt about myself, again, in relation to him. And even as an adult, I mean, even this year, I am 40 years old, and we have a sailboat that we have up there, and, you know, I take it out sailing, but because of how he is constructed, and some of this is lack of acceptance. It's all lack of acceptance on my part. But, you know, I was like, okay, the whole reason we got the sailboat is because he has always sailed our whole lives, his whole life. But we never learned, so, like, when he passes away, like, that's a huge part of our legacy that's just gonna die. So, like, 5 years ago, he bought us a sailboat that wasn't an 18-foot Hobie Cat that was gonna go 50 miles an hour on Lake Michigan, that we could just sail along in and learn all the things. Well, this past year, I was like, okay, it's great. I've got the sailing down. You're going to have to let me, like, put the boat together. Like, you're having to let me get it out there and assemble it, because if not, I know how to sail it, but I'm never going to be able to put it together.
Yeah.
But
Let me do it.
Yes, but that's when him and I rub. And it was just this time was the last time I realized. It was like the nail in the coffin that I realized that that's who he is, and I have to be okay with that. He's never going. He tried to let me, but he couldn't. He then, and I realized that's where my lack of wanting to listen to anybody and my big ego pride reactions come from. And when I get super defensive, it's because of the nature of how we've always interacted. And I did the same thing with him. I mean, this year at 40 years old, I acted like a 5-year-old child because, like, you can't tell me what to do. Like some crazy stuff. But for the most part, those relationships have all been healed from that first 4 step and the first 8 step. I mean, really, and I'm grateful for that. And then, I got done with that first round of steps my first year, and I got into service, and I started sponsoring people, like all the things, and really, at a year sober, my home group, there was just this joke because about 11 months I was getting really hard up because I had not dated anyone or even pretended to date anybody or like dated anybody for a year or more. And so like they said they were going to get me a shirt on my year anniversary that said like open for business or something, And so I did meet a guy when I had about 14 months sober, and he had 18 months sober. So, like, obviously we were super spiritually fit when we met. And so he asked me out to the Double T Diner after a meeting, and I went there, and I remember calling my sponsor, and I was so excited. And they were happy for me because I had waited, like, everything was good. He's sober, whatever, blah, blah, blah. He's not in rehab, like, all the things. And so excited. And I remember hanging up the phone and thinking, like, my picker's not broken anymore. He's probably like a doctor or a lawyer. He's got like a nice car. Like, my picker is not broken anymore. Like, I am better, And I pulled into the parking lot of the Double T Diner in Annapolis, and there was like this ungodly loud noise. I didn't know what it was when I pulled in because I pulled into the parking lot and pulled up next to a 1986 Toyota Corolla that didn't have the muffler on it, and it had all these Happy Meal toys glued to the dashboard, and it like had 420 written in magic marker in the clock thing. And I mean, it was him, and he was just like, and I just remember thinking, oh my god, it's still broken. My pointer is still broken. But by then I was already there, and we dated for about 3 years. We started, so there's that old joke, like, how can you tell when an alcoholic's on their second date? Because there's a U-Haul in the driveway. That wasn't this was the first time, like, we both wanted to do something different, but we were both living in somebody else's basement when we met, neither of us had any money, like, all this crazy shit, and, but we did date for about 3 years. We started living together after a year, and we got married. I mean, he was the only person I ever dated in recovery. We had kids when we were, 4 or 5 years sober. I mean, and he had been married before, back in the madness, a long time ago, when he was like 19. He's like 45 now. And he had a daughter from back then. It wasn't from that woman, but, so he has an older daughter that's now like 24 who lives in Florida, and she's great. She's great. But we met when she was probably like 14 or 15, but our relationship was different than any other relationship I'd been in, but we started, like, our character defects started to have problems pretty early on because we were still, like, I was basically like 13 when I met him emotionally because I started drinking when I was 12, and I'd only been sober a year, so I had no
arrested development thing.
And he was still going to the Samaritan house every night for dinner because he couldn't afford to eat. I mean, it's just funny. So,
you think it's really hit me in the last couple of years, maybe the last year, maybe the last 6 months. Of like, how when you were 16, you thought you knew everything. Mm-hmm. And then, like, when you have a 16-year-old, you realize how dumb they are. The same kind of things happened to me in recovery of, like, when I was 2 years sober, I thought I had the world by the balls,
Yep.
And Now I see a guy who's not so at 2 years. He's not really, it's
But
not that
still,
he's getting
yeah.
better and everything, but I realized it keeps me green in some sense about like how little I really did know. And then how much growth has happened since then. And what also hammers me is that I'm probably going to think the same thing at 6 years sober when I'm 12, and looking back at like this growth cycle that goes on. So yeah, you've been sober for a little while, but you're still nuttier than a fruitcake.
That's right. That is a true statement. Oh my God. And, and we had kids. And the thing is like, I am not somebody, just as a woman, like sober, not sober, alcoholic, not alcoholic. Like, I am just not like a woman that was born to be like a mother or a wife. Like, I really have to work hard at those things because they are not things that come naturally to me. There are women who that comes very naturally to. And so I did what I do when I am, because really the most pressure that there is in those early relationships and early families is financial pressure. I mean, there's just, neither one of us were independently wealthy. We both made $16 an hour. I mean, so my goal, and it talks about it in the big book, and I was sober. I'd been 4 years sober by the time we had the kids, or 5 years sober by the time we had Colin. And, but that financial insecurity came back. Fear of financial insecurity came back. And so I did what I knew to do, which was to just work harder, just to work more, just to... we still were going to meetings. I always sponsored people. He always sponsored people. We had sponsors. Like, we always had AA as part of it. But I can see now that it talks about in the big book how, if we put kind of the cart before the horse and put material well-being before spiritual well-being.
Yeah.
And my fear definitely dictated a huge portion of our marriage.
And another line in there it says, I'll say it in first person, I am the victim of the delusion that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I just manage well. So I just work harder. God damn it.
If I just try harder. Because early on in recovery, I knew that there's this weird juxtaposition between faith without works is like the whole faith without works is dead. Like, God's got it, but then I always felt like but I still have to do the work. God's not going to do for me what I couldn't do for myself, or what I should be doing for myself,
right. Yep.
And so that was, and that has carried on through my entire recovery is I get fearful financially and then I work more. It's a coping mechanism. It keeps my mind busy. It keeps my body busy. And I always showed up for my kids, and my husband as best I could. But I do see now I was not as spiritually fit all those years as I coulda, woulda, shoulda been. There's nothing I can do about it now. But like you said, I thought I knew everything I was going to know about recovery at that time. And I remember when I was about 2 years sober, somebody at a meeting was like, if you kill yourself before you have 5 years sober, you'd be killing a stranger. And I was so offended by that, because I'd done the work and I was super sober, and I already knew all the things. But it's true. At 12 years sober, I'm going through such this, identity shift in recovery that I just realized, all this stuff that I've been sort of resting my recovery on all these years is all just bullshit. It's all bullshit. I mean, it's hard to, and then, your pride and ego and all that stuff takes a hit, but God will humble you. I mean, God will humble you to the point where you're willing to do something different, but because we're alcoholics, because I'm an alcoholic, it takes an enormous amount of pain before I'm willing to admit that I have been defeated. It is a huge amount of pain before I say, okay, I'll maybe try what you're saying. You know what I mean? It's hard.
Yeah, we don't get out the white flag easy.
No. And it's funny because I was always in the middle of AA. We moved, so what happened was we were out in Maryland, living out there. I was maintenance supervisor at another two big apartment complexes for that same company by then. And we got a 20% discount on apartments out there, but the cost of living out in DC is ridiculous. So we were getting a 2-bedroom apartment with my 20% discount was still like $16.69 a month. Ooh. And I was making $29 an hour, and he was making $17 an hour. But we had one kid we had to pay $800 a week. A month, just for like a shitty in-house daycare. Like the shittiest daycare we could find was still so expensive for us. So then I got pregnant with Ruby, which the babies were planned. We planned the children. It's just that, I don't know, it's evident that we were not going to be able to sustain out there. So when I was on maternity leave with Ruby, we moved back here. And I had a job at Oxmoor Apartment Homes as the maintenance supervisor with a free 3-bedroom apartment when we moved here. Like I'd done like a FaceTime interview, and I had that when we moved here. So, and Mike had a job when we moved here, so I was making $22 an hour, but we had a free $1,200 a month apartment, so it was good. But he didn't like that job of mine because I was on call all the time. That was just I was maintenance when I met him. I was on call my entire life. But when I was a maintenance supervisor, and especially in Maryland, during the winters, those nor'easters would come, and I would be gone for days at a time for the snow removal and for all the fire sprinklers busting. So it was just constant. All that stuff put a strain on their family and on the relationship. And so... anyway, so when we moved here, we did that. But when we immediately got here, we both got sponsors. We both started going to meetings. It took about 1.5 years before anybody in Louisville knew my fucking name in AA. You know what I mean? And I kept showing up, but I was so uncomfortable. It was like being a newcomer. I had 7 years sober, and my ego felt, like obligated to raise my hand at every meeting and tell them I had 7. I'm not a newcomer. Like, I'm new to this meeting, but I'm not a newcomer. I have 7 years sober. Because my pride could not fucking handle it.
But on the flip side of that is people are not going to get to know you until you raise your hands,
That's
and
true.
say things and open yourself up to the group.
That's true.
So, it's a double-edged sword.
It is.
My ego getting in the way, needing to make sure to improve myself, but also they're getting to hear me, and you can sit in the back room of an AA meeting your entire life and never get to know anybody.
That is true.
Never say a word, just stay back there.
So, I started going to late night meetings, and we would alternate. He would go to primetime meetings, I would go to late night meetings, and we tried to do that, but we weren't spending any time together. And when we got married, I just remember our neighbor, who was also in recovery, saying the triangle is like God and AA, God, AA, the marriage. You know what I mean? Like that was the order that things were supposed to go, but that gets wonky. And like I said, when we got together, we were sober, but it's spiritual progress in the way that we hadn't progressed very far spiritually in this program yet before we had gotten together either. Mm-hmm. And so, and our relationship was good for the most part and everything. But marriage is hard, recovery's hard, managing kids are hard. It's all hard. Yep. And if I'm not in fit spiritual condition, everything seems like a burden instead of a grace that's being placed on me, Yeah. And so, yes.
Transformation that happens with us, you really see it when somebody's new. That transformation is very visible. That's what I think was part of the reason why when these couples, how many people break up after one of them gets sober? She's wanted him to get sober for 15 years. And he does, and then the relationship ends.
Yeah.
It's that doesn't make any sense. That's what she's wanted all along, and now she got it. And but it's that, like you say, in the picker kind of idea of that I am such a different person. I think that still goes. We continually are evolving, and I'm not the guy I was 2 years ago. Mm-mm. So if you hook up with me 2 years ago, by now, I may not be. I may not be what you're looking for anymore.
And we grew spiritually in different directions.
Yeah, two people doing that at the same time, trying to keep that together. That's a whole nother. You think of other things is hard.
Yeah,
that's hard too.
So when we moved, and then moving's hard. So we packed everything up and we moved here. We had 2 babies. She was 5 weeks old. Colin was 18 months old. We packed up a U-Haul, put his car on the back. He drove the truck with the cats in there. My dad drove the U-Haul. My mom rode with me with the 2 kids. Like, it was just a shit show. We get all the way there. To Kentucky. We had an apartment. We moved in.
What was your connection here? How did you...
So I figured it was close enough to Madison to be close to my family.
Yeah.
Okay. And my sister now lives in Sellersburg. So she moved back from Maryland about 2 years before before we did.
You were getting back in the area. That had got past me.
Yeah. But not getting all the way back to Madison. Yeah. I wasn't quite ready for that.
Right.
But, so, things were going okay, but just like all that stuff, and I think that and obviously with the divorce rate being 50% at this point, it happens in all human marriages. It's not just hard for alcoholics to stay married with kids. It is hard for everybody to stay married with kids. And but like I said, COVID hit, and meetings slowed down. We started having a meeting in our backyard. We had been having a meeting in our backyard for about 3 years prior to COVID, which was good. So when COVID happened, we were still having it, but at some point we kind of stopped because the Andy snitch line and all that stuff, I was just getting nervous about everything, so we stopped having it. But then we started back up, and so those were the only meetings I was really getting to, was the 2 that were at my house on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I was meeting with my sponsees every week. But I had stopped really talking to my sponsor because I'd gotten a resentment at her at some point because, we're petty, we're immature, and my disease finds cracks and it gets in there.
Yep.
And so I started making decisions based on my best thinking, and I forgot that my best thinking got me here, Yeah. And so somewhere in our relationship, about when I was working a lot, about 3 years ago, Mike had he had a girlfriend and stuff that was far away, but it was really devastating to me. But I took about 5 days to have a nervous breakdown, and I said, look, we've got kids, we've got a life, if you're going to leave me for this woman, you're free to do that, but I'm not going to end this marriage for this. But I think it broke something in me that I wasn't really willing to, I think I just did what I always do, which is okay, I'm just going to try harder. I'm just going to try harder, and it will fix this.
Yeah.
And so, but, sex problems, we all have sex problems, so we'd hardly be human if we didn't. And, sex problems were a part of the marriage problems. And at some point, my best thinking, again, after COVID had been going on for a while, this was probably in maybe in August or September of last year, so about a year ago, I said, if you're so unhappy with the marriage, the sex in the marriage, and you aren't getting the womanly attention you needed from me, because that's what he needed, but I, in and of myself, don't really have a lot of that womanly stuff in me. I'm just not really super womanly, wifely. And so I said, why don't we have an open marriage? This was my best thinking. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I had gotten to a place where I believed that we really aren't meant to be monogamous creatures. It's weird how it gets in there. But so anyways, so he agreed, and he agreed if it was for him, but once I acted on it.
One way open.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Until.
And so I acted on it. He found out about it and demanded that we stop the open marriage. And this is where the lying and cheating.
Was it a don't ask, don't tell kind of open marriage?
So we had we had 4 rules, which was that it was never at the house. It wasn't anybody in our friend group that we were friends with. You always use a condom, and it was don't ask, don't tell. Those were the 4 rules.
Be discreet kind of thing.
But he couldn't. It's just the way he's constructed, and I'm not blaming him for that. It was a Hail Mary on my part to save the marriage. It was after many times of trying to find solutions to problems that we had. This was like the Hail Mary, right? Yeah. And it obviously didn't turn out well, but when he wanted to stop, I didn't stop. And so that's where the lying and cheating and stealing came in, right? Like, I just became that same person. I wasn't using, I wasn't drinking. I was still meeting with my sponsees every week, and some of them I told what was going on. I was being honest about it with those people because I as a sober alcoholic, I can't fucking handle that shit anymore.
I have to have somebody to.
Yeah, and I was going to drink. There was no doubt.
You have to be completely honest with someone if you're going to live long and happily.
Yeah, and I'm grateful that I didn't drink during that time period. Like, it used to be I didn't even not put the shopping cart back in the corral before I thought I was going to be struck drunk because it was dishonest. It was not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And here I am, with 11 years sober, having sex with another man who is also married with kids, who is an active alcoholic, because I seek those things out left to my own devices. If I'm not seeking God, I will be seeking that, and I didn't realize that till now. That's why I'm in still a lot of pain from all of this right now. Like, we started the divorce classes that you have to take with your kids this weekend, and there's still a lot of emotional trauma on both sides. We're not exposing the children to it, which I'm super grateful for, and for the most part we can talk, but it's hard to deconstruct a life that you've spent years constructing.
Yes.
But I have learned so much that I was so, I guess almost like condescending about for so many years, right? Like, because my theory in AA was that I just do the next right thing. I just do the next right thing. I just do the next right thing. And I did always do the next right thing. But I obviously wasn't being true to myself, or God wouldn't have put me in a place to where all this had to be revealed to me. Like, for whatever reason, like, I was doing the next right thing, but I wasn't happy. And God doesn't want that for me either, but my willpower and pride was going to keep that charade up forever. And it wasn't about Mike. It's not that I wasn't happy being married and in recovery. I just was living as a person that I just wasn't. And I had to look back as to why I had done that. And it's because I feel like it was because when I got sober, I had been such a menace to society for so long, and I had done so many things wrong that when I got sober, I felt like it was my duty to meet these social norms that are put in place by everybody. You get married, you have kids, you get a house, you get a job, like all these pressures I put on myself, never asking myself like asking myself and God, like, where I'm supposed to be in life. It was just always like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I'm supposed to do.
It seems like you skipped all those steps, and now it's time to catch you back up to them and start checking the boxes that normal people do. Yep.
But then losing myself completely, and that's what happened. And so, that's kind of where we are today. Last week, I'm emotional this week, too, because last week I got called to jury duty, which I've been on jury duty one other time in Virginia Beach. And it was really just call in, and then you go and sit there for a long time. Last time I didn't have a cell phone. I just had to sit there forever.
Now you can at least play on your phone.
Yeah, well, I got called into a murder trial.
Oh, wow.
And I sat on it all week, and then we had to, and I was one of 3 people that were trying to get it down to manslaughter on Friday, and then we ended up convicting him of murder on Friday, and had to sentence him, and it was...
Oh, wow, that is a lot.
It was a lot, and for the sentencing, the kid sat up there. I mean, he was 19 when the crime happened. He's 22 now. He sat up there and said that his dad died of a drug overdose when he was 6. His mom committed suicide when he was 10 because she had him when she was 13. And he'd been in 26 institutions and group homes before he was 19 years old. And I was just so overwhelmed with emotion that it's mostly gratitude. Like, mostly everything that I feel and should feel is gratitude, because that should be me. That should be my kids. If left in my cups, if Mike was left in his cups, that's the life my kids would be living.
Yeah.
And I have to remember that I may not be perfect, and I'm not, but I'm a lot better than I was when I was drinking, and I just figured out this week, like, I can't compare myself to everybody else. The only person I can compare myself to is who I would be right now if I was still using and drinking, and there's no comparison there. So all I have to do is keep trudging forward. That's all I can do.
Yeah.
But I'm super grateful that we did this today, because I was definitely feeling kind of Debbie Downer this morning, so I appreciate it.
Well, good. And I had a little hesitancy because I know I had no any idea about the jury duty thing, but I knew some shit was going down in your life.
Yeah.
And sometimes doing this is not the right thing at a particular point in somebody's life. You know, I've had some postponements or some energy not being in the right place, and they kind of very gently saying that to me, and I'm totally cool with that. I mean, I am right on it. If you're not feeling it, let's not do it. There's no last thing I want this thing to do is feel like it's a pressured situation.
Of course.
But you know, sometimes it can be a little cathartic and a little, you know, to talk some things out, and I appreciate you sharing that with me, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to get that stuff out, especially like here in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
One thing to be telling somebody that over at the coffee shop, that it does go to show to the level of where you are at today, though. You know, we're saying that not perfect, right? No, never will be. That's not, you know, there's the word perfect is used in the book a number of times, but if it's, to perfect and enlarge your spiritual life, you know, and like real quick and go, that doesn't mean perfect. That's not what he meant. You know, he means aim
towards
in that
perfection.
direction. Yeah. It does not mean that you must perfect it, because that starts setting bars up way too high. And, you know, as people with some little bit of time under your belt, you can kind of end up being and I think I see this in some places of where people look like they're just fine all the time and everything is just peachy fucking king all the time. And that is not the case. You know, we have to, you know, this is real life, and they didn't promise us a bucket of roses when we got sober. Some days are.
Yeah.
There's more of those today than there used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be honest and tell this stuff so that other people who, because like when I'm, you know, he's saying a minute ago, I was 2 years sober, I was Superman. I just couldn't wait to get my wings. I've been looking in the mail every day. When are they going to be here? When are they going to be here? And then to realize, and I'm real thankful for having a sponsor that lets me see him too. One speaker I'd heard one time, and you know, for some reason my mind loves to trap this stuff and keep it. The thing you was talking about, the remembering those people's names, and I know they were in your life for a little while, but but they also had an impact on you, and that's why those names imprint, right? Mm-hmm. And I can remember my first few meetings, like that meeting I'm talking about on March the 26th in 2011, I think it was 26th. I can almost tell you, I know a lot of those people today, and I can almost tell you where they were sitting in relation to me, you know, where people were sitting at. That had that kind of impact on me that almost put like a photograph in me. And I can do the same thing when I landed at the Spiritual Underground, because the whole thing happened to me again, where when I sat down in that meeting and look around, I knew something was different about this place. And I can almost tell you where every one of those people were sitting around me. I know who was on each side of me. And what I was going to with that was that there's Bob Earl is a speaker I listen to a lot, you know, and he said that the definition of intimacy is me being me and me letting you see me, you know, because that's the other thing, this Facebook type of life where you put on the mask for everybody.
Oh yeah,
you know, that's something that we get real in AA, and people talk about their real stuff that they're dealing with, and it's very refreshing to have that. I learned a new word not long ago was compersion. And it's like, and so it's the opposite of envy and joy. It's the way where I can actually feel for you when you're having a good time and when you're not having such a good time, and I can feel for you rather than start doing what my normal thing is, like you were saying, comparing myself to you. And either knowing that at least I ain't got it that bad, or dang, I ain't got it that good. Because my scales tilt me to want to go to one of those two places, not just this place today where I can just be here with somebody regardless of what they're going through, and be here for people, you know, without taking it on as some kind of comparison, some kind of contest.
Well, and that honesty, like, I mean, today, I know, because I can't always, like, initially, I usually can't be honest with things, but as soon as I admitted it to God and another person, just like it tells us in our literature, then that's my truth, and I'm okay with telling it once it's my truth, you know what I mean?
Yep, I heard you say that. It rang. You said a lot of things, but I don't want to, like, continually interrupt you while you're talking either. But when you dumped on your sister, you know, and it's kind of like the way our fifth step is that it says, you know, admit it to God and another person. I don't think I've really truly admitted it to myself until I have admitted it to another person. Mm-hmm. You know, when you say here it is.
Yep.
Up until then, I just kept the curtain down, you know, and I'd only peek through once in a while and figured I could keep everybody at bay if you didn't see me. Once you were able to do that, that relief one gets from dumping that out, even though it was not necessarily a great moment for you or no big stuff happened, like kind of thing. But the fact that you got, you know, it's all bottled up in you. It's like a shook up soda can. Mm-hmm. And it's just in there, just waiting for a pinhole, you know, and you're able to go, psh, and it's like, oh, you know, I don't know if I could have handled it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where people get when they get to the jumping off point of trying, you know, one of the reasons why we have so many suicides and that kind of thing around these things that are so full and they don't have anywhere to go with it. So just one more ounce of pressure inside the can is all they can take. Yep. And they punch out.
That's why I'm grateful I didn't choose to take a drink, because the other option is you commit suicide or we just take a drink. Because it's the only solution to feel better.
The night before, you were cocaining it like you were in a suicidal fashion.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that I'm capable of doing, you know, hoping that if I get enough in me, this will just end. Yeah. I think what I say is I never would. I don't think I've ever had the courage to kill myself. But I wanted to die. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
If I didn't wake up tomorrow, that was going to be okay.
Yep.
Actually, preferable. Not being able to do another day of that. But I do thank you for your honesty. It's one of the other things that this podcast does is that every time somebody, you know, I get like a new friend, and I can't have enough of that. And in this, my net, my support network, so to speak, of friends doing this thing can't be deep or wide enough.
Yep.
And I get to know you better because you let me see you, and I appreciate that. That's a lot to learn in there, and you're just sharing what's happening.
Well, I appreciated it. I wasn't as nervous as I thought it was going to be. So.
Yeah, most people aren't. The microphones disappear after a little bit, and we're just talking.
Yep.
Do you have any final thoughts or any last things? If you was gonna, I don't know, anything else that you'd like to say? Some people give the little cliche if you're new here, or you can, if you don't, that is fine too.
No, I mean, all I can say is that this program works 100% of the time when I work it.
Amen. It sure does.
So that's it.
Well, I will close it the same way I close every single one of these. I got two things, and everything I know about this recovery thing was taught to me. I certainly didn't come to any of it on my own. Anything I say is not mine. It is something that I've learned since being here. And one of them is if you're not having a blast in your recovery, it's your own damn fault. Some days are better than others. These are a lot better days than that old thing about my worst day now is better than my best day then. And I want to thank everybody for allowing Lindsay and I to participate in our recoveries in this manner today. Peace out.